key element of high expectations teaching is how and how well we communicate our expectations of positive and professional behaviours with our students. But it's not just about managing behaviours like we're traffic cops directing the traffic of our classrooms, studios, and workspaces. It's about more than that. It's more than just stopping unwanted behaviours. It's about the quality of the relationships we build with our students, with each other, and with the curriculum. Like with everything in education, there's no magic silver bullet to ensuring that unwanted behaviours are minimised. What worked yesterday and the day before might not work tomorrow. But there are some things we can do as teachers, tutors, lecturers and trainers to set the most likely conditions for promoting positive behaviours within our session. Before we jump to the strategies for promoting positive learning behaviours, let's have a look at some of the possible causes for unwanted behaviour. Often we're told that a well-planned, dynamic and engaging lesson will take care of behaviour. But we know from our own experience that that's not always true. I'm sure you've spent countless evenings planning and creating a brilliant session only for it to fall flat on its face when you stood in front of the students. Why do you think that might be? Think about your own learning at school, a lesson that you didn't behave particularly well in. How interested and capable were you in the subject? How easy or difficult was the content? How well did you get on with your teachers and peers? How did you generally feel about school? What else was going on with your life that influenced how you felt and behaved? And what sort of mood was your teacher in? Saying that it's all down to planning is just too simplistic and moves all of the responsibility onto you, the teacher. But when it comes to behaviour management, the only person we can really manage is ourselves. Moving away from the view of behaviour as a problem to be managed, rather than needs being anticipated to facilitate the greatest possibility of positive behaviours, can create the conditions to get the best possible chance of a productive, engaging and exciting lesson. When we're experiencing unwanted behaviours that challenge us in our sessions, it's easy to become frustrated and annoyed with our students. A common statement I often hear is, they're 17, 18, 19 years old, they should know how to behave by now. But advances in MRI and fMRI scanning, along with the work of Professor Sarah Jane Blakemore at the University of Cambridge, have identified some surprising findings when it comes to the adolescent brain. The adolescent brain is undergoing critical and profound growth and development, and synaptic pruning right through the teenage years and often into the early 20s and sometimes 30s. Activity in the medial prefrontal cortex, the area of the brain that develops the ability to see things from other people's perspectives in order to guide behaviour and that stops us from taking excessive risks, for instance, decreases during adolescence. Whilst at the same time the limbic system, that's involved with emotion processing and reward processing, including the rewarding feeling of taking risks, has been found to be hypersensitive in adolescents compared to adults. Part of our job as adults and educators is to create the conditions for learning that takes into account these massive changes that our students' brains are undergoing. By modelling the behaviour that we want to see, setting clear and consistent expectations, and above all else, having unconditional positive regard for our students. So let's take a look at Ellis and Todd's Behaviours for Learning and Relationships for Learning as a starting point. When we look at behaviours for learning, Ellis and Todd argue that there are three key relationships at play. Relationships with the self, relationships with the curriculum, and relationships with others. Relationships with the self are predominantly emotional, relationships with the curriculum is predominantly cognitive, and relationships with others is predominantly social. Let's explore how these relationships for learning might relate to our students' behaviours for learning. Relationships with the self might include their self-efficacy beliefs, how they value effort, how they identify with responsibility or authority, and how curious and motivated they are. Relationship with the curriculum might include how well they stay on task, how well they can monitor their own understanding of tasks and skills, how they manage their time and plans and sequence any actions needed. Relationships with others could include how well the student builds positive, meaningful relationships, how well they collaborate with others and can make valuable contributions, and how clear they are on the expectations and norms of the group, the lesson, and the college. Relationships for learning do not only concern the students. As teachers, our own relationships to learning is also critical. For us, our relationship with self might include our own self-efficacy, our self-worth, resilience, and confidence. Our knowledge of the curriculum and pedagogy, our repertoire of teaching approaches, and our enthusiasm for our subject and technical vocation can have a massive influence on how we relate to the curriculum. And of course, our willingness and ability to form and maintain appropriate, positive relationships with our students and with our colleagues has a massive impact on how we set the conditions for learning for our students. It's worth reflecting on these relationships and looking for ways that we can support the students with their relationships for learning, as well as taking the time to develop our own relationships for learning too. So let's look at some practical strategies we can use to promote positive behaviours for learning in our sessions. Now, before we jump into how to address unwanted behaviour in our sessions, it's worth noting this quote by educational behaviour specialist Paul Dix. Culture smashes strategy every time. If we can set the conditions for learning, make our expectations clear, and ensure that they're applied positively and consistently right across the team, you should be in a much better position before any sanctions are issued to students. What are the college-wide rules and expectations? What are the subject or technical expectations? What about team-wide expectations, and what are your own personal expectations? If the college rule is only water is allowed to be drank in classrooms, workshops and studios, is this rule consistently applied right across the team? And if it is it applied in the same way? If you don't follow the basic rules set by your organisation which are clear, then when it comes to the more tricky, ambiguous situations, it's going to be much harder for you to keep your students on track. As a student, would I know and see the rules applied when I come into college? What should I expect if I'm late or I don't attend? What if I'm eating or drinking energy drinks in the class? Is wearing coats and hats okay? And when can I use my mobile phone? If I don't know the rules of the game, or the rules are blurred depending on how you, my teacher, feels today, or you react one way and your colleague reacts in a different way, I'll just make up my own rules. And as we've seen, I might not have the maturity to make those decisions effectively. What we need here is consistency. Once we've agreed on the rules, we need to ensure consistency right across the team wherever we can. They need to be clear, unambiguous, and agreed by everyone. What we need are some visible consistencies, no matter the student, the lecturer, or the session. Anyone entering that learning space should be able to see them being consistently applied, right across the team. The next strategy in our toolbox is positive intention. Take a look at this slide and tell me what you see. If you said a black dot or similar, then you'd be right, but only partially right. In our sessions, it's easy to fall into the trap of only seeing the black dot when it comes to unwanted or unproductive behaviours, and to get into the negative mindset that our students or groups are a nightmare, and ignore all of that great learning behaviour that's also happening in the sessions. At times it can be hard not to focus on all of the perceived negative behaviour that we're experiencing. Look at this image and now try to not think of a pink elephant. The dominant verb here is to think, so naturally we focus our thinking on the very thing we're not supposed to be thinking about, a pink elephant. Instead of focusing on the learning behaviour that we don't want, focus instead on the behaviour you do want. Instead of Shanika, stop messing around, we can reframe it as Shanika, I need you to focus on your work now, thanks. We bring the behaviour we want into sharper focus for the student rather than the behaviour that we don't want, and we keep it as positive and professional as we possibly can. It can be really satisfying, even if only temporarily, to give a student a dressing down, especially if the behaviour that they've been displaying has been challenging you over a length of time. But try to avoid it as much as possible. It isn't going to help you achieve the outcome that you want for very long. And remember that behaviour is a form of communication. What's your student trying to communicate to you, their classmates, or the world in general with the behaviour that they're displaying? Remember that individuals are not their behaviour, and by deciding who our students are based on the limited acts we see in a limited context of our classrooms, studios and workshops, we're falling into the fundamental attribution error, where we assume that a person's actions depend on what kind of person that person is, rather than the social and environmental forces that influence the person. Maintain unconditional positive regard throughout and allow the student to wipe the slate clean. Every session is an opportunity for a fresh start, and try not to make it or take it personally. We're trying to de-escalate the situation and avoid disruption to learning as much as possible. Losing your temper or having an argument in front of the rest of the group only raises the stakes higher and becomes a lose-lose situation. Make it clear it's the behaviour and not the student that you have an issue with, and stay calm and professional throughout. The only behaviour you really have control over is your own. Another simple and surprisingly effective strategy for communicating positive intention is to use incidental language. Replacing phrases like please and using thank you at the end of a request is a subtle way of communicating that you are expecting your request to be followed, whilst remaining polite and professional. Instead of, Paul, can you please stop talking and turn around and get on with your work, please? You could be saying, Paul, I need you to focus on your work now, thanks. I'm focusing on the behaviour that I want, and I'm subtly telling them that I expect it to be done. I'm also doing it in my nice voice and not that teacher voice that we know we've all got. So the last of our 4-part strategy on promoting positive behaviours for learning is sanction. Often when we're looking to minimise disruptive or unwanted behaviours in our session, we head straight for sanctions as a way of nipping the behaviour in the bud. How we impose our authority in our classrooms should be the very last strategy we turn to if we first focus on the other 3 strategies to promote positive behaviours in our classrooms. Clear expectations, consistency, and positivity first. And our response should be positive, graduated, and minimise conflict wherever possible. We don't just jump straight to removing a student from our session with no opportunity for the student to adjust their unwanted behaviour unless that behaviour warrants such drastic action. We move from the least intrusive to the most intrusive methods as a graduated response. There's a power imbalance inherent in our classrooms, and how we approach these sanctions is much more important than the sanctions themselves. We should be modelling the behaviour that we want to see with clarity, consistency, and above all, kindness. Tactical ignoring. Tactical ignoring refers to the deliberate decision not to directly confront a specific behaviour. The method is effective for minor off-task behaviour when the teacher is sure that the student will return to the activity at hand without the need for further adult intervention. This is a particularly useful method for focusing on the primary behaviour, for instance, requesting that a student removes their earbuds and tactically ignoring any sighing, tutting or complaining. The focus remains on the flow of the session. Physical proximity. Like tactical ignoring, using physical proximity can be a simple but effective method of communicating that unwanted behaviour has been noticed for minor off-task behaviour. All the teacher needs to do is move towards the student who's off task and pause momentarily by their side whilst continuing to address the class. Using physical proximity is an effective method to redirect students back on task in a respectful way without calling them out in front of their friends. For this to work, you can't just sit at your desk or stand at the board, you need to be moving around the class. Using physical proximity also provides you with an opportunity for you to assess progress and also makes you more accessible for those students who might not be too confident about asking for help in the session. With non-verbal signalling or silent signals, you and your students can communicate tactfully and discreetly without drawing the attention of the rest of the class. Examples include pausing briefly whilst giving slightly prolonged eye contact, using hand gestures to signal for a student to turn around, or to put all 4 legs of a chair on the floor. When we're looking to promote positive behaviours, our language is critical. As suggested by Dr. Bill Rogers, using incidental language such as saying thanks after a request instead of the usual please helps to communicate a confident and respectful sense of expectation that the request will be taken up by the student. Rule reminders. As discussed previously, it is critical that once we've agreed on the rules of our classroom together, these need to be clear, unambiguous, and visibly consistent. This then allows the teacher to redirect any unwanted behaviour with positive correctional language. And we can try to depersonalise our direction to minimise conflict as much as possible. They're not your rules, they're the college rules. Rule reminders can be posed as questions such as, Rebecca, what's the rule about bringing food and drink into the class? Or, I can still see students with their jackets on, what's the rule about wearing jackets in class? Let's take them off now, thanks. Next is offering simple direction that tells the student what you require. Tone of voice is really important and should be delivered positively and calmly. We need to ensure we give the student enough take-up time to adjust their behaviour. It may be necessary for you to approach the student and without drawing too much attention, restate the rule again or to restate the simple direction more directly. Consequence expressed as a choice. Expressing consequences as a choice gives the student some agency and allows the teacher to focus on the unwanted behaviour rather than the student's character. It communicates the message that this isn't a personal attack, rather the student has chosen to not follow the rules and the consequence will be applied. Using choice conveys to the student that there is an alternative outcome that their behaviour can determine. If the unwanted behaviour continues after the student has been given enough take-up time, then the consequences expressed previously is applied. And again, it's important to implement this in a calm, positive and respectful manner throughout. Exit from lesson. Using the least to most intrusive methods we've discussed should help to minimise using the most intrusive strategies. Removing a student from your class should be the very last option you choose. At this point, no learning can take place and the opportunity for the student to self-regulate is lost, not to mention the disruption it causes to the rest of the session. But sometimes, despite all of the strategies that we've discussed, behaviour that significantly impacts on the learning of others continues. It's important to know what systems operate in your organisation with regard to these more drastic sanctions and their use. Following any sanction or consequence, repairing and rebuilding relationships with our students is essential. Every session is an opportunity for a fresh start. And within a lesson, the teacher can re-establish a working relationship with the student to communicate the fundamental message that no grudges are held and that we care about the student-teacher relationship. This could be as simple as returning to their work area and asking the student how they're getting on. When we take the time and effort to repair and rebuild relationships, we're supporting the students to deepen their relationship with the curriculum, with each other, and with themselves. And to quote Rogers, it affirms that our fundamental humanity is at the heart of our profession. So this video is just a starting point when it comes to promoting positive behaviours in our sessions. There's so much advice and guidance out there on the web. So as a bonus for watching till the end of the video, I've created a free Padlet collection of resources and information regarding promoting positive behaviours, and you can access that using this QR code or the link in the description below. And if you know someone who would find this video useful, then please share the link with them. And remember, culture smashes strategy every time.